So today I thought we would chat about movement and pain, and how both pain can affect movement and movement can affect pain, and how we can identify what creates pain, whether it be from an early development stage all the way through now when you're going into your gym routine or whatever class you're doing, and then vice versa, maybe you're not moving enough, which is housing more pain and not allowing the pain to resolve itself. But we can come at this we can chat for hours on this one.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's just see if we can keep it as simple. But maybe we'll start with the obvious one, which is people who are exercising or moving and having pain during that. Is that, I mean, when we exercise, when we move, there should not be pain. No. Not at all. So if you are someone who is training at the moment or has been training and experiencing pain while you train, that's a red flag. We need to address that. But also too, what if you're someone who has had an issue, gone through the whole recovery process, and you haven't changed whatever it is that we need to change, and we'll go through a whole lot of this, and that reoccurring injury keeps coming up or pain is still there. I think that's what we need to really be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, look, pain is a request for change anyway. So, that old approach, no pain, no gain. Yeah. Like, I'm a former army soldier, I know all about that, but I can tell you it's not really the smartest approach when working with movement, and particularly in the rehab process. So if you do have pain, one of the cardinal rules is never ever move into pain. Yeah. So maybe back off from the pain, and then we now need to actually pull back a bit and work out, why is that pain there? Is that coming from the local side, or is it because there's actually a postural imbalance left to right or up or down? So most people in society these days have neuromuscular imbalances. Yeah. So they have muscles that are firing when they shouldn't be, and muscles that are not firing properly, and they'll have sort of things going on one side of the body and things going on the other side of the body. And if these things aren't addressed and we train over the top of them, we just compound and drive that dysfunction deeper into the body, which is actually going to make it harder to unwind it.
Yeah. Exactly right, because the body is clever, right? It's the best compensator.
Yeah.
And that's what they say, like, athletes are the best compensators. If they haven't addressed some form of biomechanical issue or structural issue, they will compensate. And they're probably the best in the world. But
Usain Bolt had like a longer leg, supposedly. I don't know how true that is, but
So if and that's the whole idea of understanding it at the beginning too. So if for those of you who are sort of watching this and thinking, well, that's me, I've always had an issue or an injury somewhere or some sort of pain, and I'm just going on and doing what everyone else is doing. So I'm going to all my commercial classes and I'm doing that sort of stuff. You really need to sort of step back and look at, I think this is a big part of it too. The industry has kind of drilled into people, you just got to train, like move and exercise and
go
hard, hit training, do your circuits. But it's not about that at all. It's about movement. It's about moving right, moving efficiently and moving well. So for a lot, I would say like 90, this is just a random throw in the dart here, but I'd say like 90% of the population around the world need to change their mentality when it comes to exercise and movement.
Yeah.
Look at how you're moving, assess yourself properly, get someone who knows what they're actually doing, number one, to assess you, and then take you back. You may have to regress a fair way back, way back even to like development stage time.
Absolutely. I mean, like movement, especially early development movements, like such as crawling and rolling, they actually, well, they seem really simple when you're an infant, or if you've got children and you watch them and do these movements, they actually format higher order movements. So for instance, holding your head up right is the first thing that you learn. These muscles of the neck need to hold your head up. Then you learn how to roll, and the rolling formats rocking, and rocking formats crawling, and then crawling formats walking. And then walking, if you can walk well, then you could probably run. But if you have deficiencies in any of those steps, and a lot of people do, more than you think, then we actually need to regress everything, go to that step, work on that step, and then we can move forward and hopefully be pain-free, and then you'll be able to move more efficiently. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on a really good point too, which I think is important as well, is when we look at the traditional sort of forms of exercising in the industry, it's based all around bodybuilding, right? So it's all about the aesthetics of how you look. It's not much about function. And yes, the term now functional training is big, but even then there's a massive chunk of the pie missing when we're looking at that functional training. the industry, when you're going, if you think about it, all the exercises that you're probably doing right now is all stuck in what we call one plane of movement. So let's look at that: squats, all
sagittal plane movement.
Lunges,
so that's up and down, forward and back.
Forward and back, chin-ups, push-ups, walking lunges. That's all in one plane. We are three-dimensional. We live in three-dimensional space, so it makes more sense to actually train in that three-dimensional space. One of the most important planes is the transverse plane, which is rotation. We walk, we run, that's how we move. We move in what's called a contralateral reciprocation, so we rotate. So if we're not training that and we're not doing that more often and in different scenarios and in different settings and everything, you're missing out on a massive chunk on efficient movement, but eventually pain-free movement.
Yeah. I've got a saying about the transverse plane. It's power and pain relief lives in the transverse plane. So if you are negating movement through the transverse plane consciously, so we do it unconsciously when we get out of our car or we reach for something, that's still moving through the transverse plane. But training in that pattern consciously actually is a stimulus that the brain needs. We need stimulus from all these three dimensions at all times, so then the brain can actually see the body and therefore it can interact with gravity and the environment better. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's sort of like, I guess, some of the best tips is look at what you're doing training-wise. Understand that you want to be covering all planes of movement, ideally, with different loads, with different, just anything, different terrains, everything.
Different variables.
So many variables.
There's more than sets and reps.
Yes.
There's timing, there's tempo, there's, like I said, changes in elevation in different positions.
Sequencing.
Yeah.
The whole lot.
Tempo is a massive one. Speed is another one. You've got to really address things on multiple levels.
Yeah.
The brain, via movement, requires novel stimulus, which is a changing stimulus. When it gets that stimulus, the frontal cortex lights up, and not only does it build the frontal cortex, but it also builds our sort of movement repertoire, which is going to help us, for instance, if we ever needed to run or in a situation that we needed to use our body, we're less likely to have an injury because our nervous system and our sensory system is developed and is robust enough. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. One of the great things about training in this style is that it's not just training the muscles like everyone thinks it is. We're training the brain. So you'll actually, this is what most people, the feedback we have here when people do sessions with us, they leave saying, oh, I've never had to think so much about movement and how my body moves and what I'm trying to understand, which is at the beginning a fantastic thing. That's great because in my mind, I'm like, we're really starting to create new motor programs in their brain. They're starting to really have that elasticity through all the brain as well, which is a very important thing as you grow older. So that is a bonus. Just go back to what you're doing at the moment, and if you've just started, one thing that's been missing in the industry for a long period of time is anyone can jump into any class, for example, without being assessed, without knowing anything, and you're just jumping straight into a class that everyone else is doing. That's quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And you will start to build in faulty motor patterns eventually over time, which are going to take a long time to undo. So just have a little bit of that intelligence to kind of go, okay, I don't want to just do what everyone else is doing. I'm quite unique. I have different unique patterns.
Everyone's
I need to look
different.
after that.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the whole thing, because all these different things, I think they do work, but you need to be assessed and by a professional to work out where your deficiencies lie, where your strengths are, and how do you tailor the movement training or the session towards that, because that's when you're going to get really good results and pain-free results. Like in terms of I'm a manual therapist as well, but I would say that the quickest way and the most empowering way to get people out of pain is actually through movement, if it's done well. That being said, if you're seeing a trainer or some sort of movement professional and they're not thoroughly assessing you, at least in your first session, and you're, say, wanting to see them to get out of pain, then that's something you might want to consider, to go to find someone that does that sort of thorough assessment, looking at your structure, looking at your posture, looking at what muscles are firing and what are not, and then are they tailoring the program specifically for you, not just how they train themselves. Are they actually making it about you and your nervous system and your movement patterns?
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So,
That's like one of the most important things these days, I reckon, because there are so many trainers these days. There's so many sort of cowboy trainers. There's a lot of short courses that people are doing. But, yes, it's just exercise at the end of the day. But what happens neurally, what happens to the body when you just exercise,
and when you load it
is quite big. So it's not just exercise really at the end of the day. It's about movement efficiency and the patterning of the body. So maybe we'll talk about now, to help those people who are in pain, what we want to look at. What are these steps to get you out of pain in terms of identifying maybe where it's coming from to begin with? Because a lot of people go, I'm sore here, but is it really there?
No.
Is it somewhere else that's created something? If there's more than just going to a source of pain.
Pain, like where they feel the pain, is sometimes can be the cause, but rarely is it. It's usually an action signal. And there's other areas of vulnerability. Usually the where you've got the pain is where that area is trying to compensate for other areas that are weak. So where would you look? So you'd be looking at someone's posture, for instance. That's a very good window into the brain, into how the brain is moving the body. And then also, gait, just looking at how someone actually walks. I mean, gait's the most fundamental movement pattern for humans. Mm-hmm. And from there, testing muscles is always a good thing. So if you start to test muscles and you find that they're not working, they're not firing properly, that means they're inhibited. And if you have an inhibited muscle somewhere, then a muscle near it or somewhere else has to fire harder in order to compensate for the deficiency. So that would be where I'd start, I think. I also look at the brain and how the brain controls movement, but at least having posture, movement, and some muscle testing, I think, is a good way to do it. Yeah.
And you touched on, before we started filming, about the identity of pain and what that means for the person, because a lot of people will use the diagnosis of pain sometimes in their favour, for whatever that means, and that can be a bit more of a psychological side of things too, but this does happen. So if you've had a chronic or long-term pain somewhere or an injury somewhere, there's a lot of other layers that you might want to address too.
For pain?
For pain, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and the number one thing you got to look at is there emotions attached to that? And you could say with every pain, yes. And that's driven by a part of the brain called the limbic system, which is like our emotional it's the whole area of the brain where we react into that fight flight. So every time we might have an injury, we might hold that stress within that sort of muscle inhibition pattern or that compensation pattern. Another area to look at is breathing.
Breathing's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, the diaphragm breathing apparatus, that's a structural thing as well. So if that isn't, and that is also impacted by stress, but that is a structure. What else? Also organs. So for instance, if you're getting chronic, right-sided shoulder and neck pain, that can sometimes be that the liver isn't, in position properly, and it refers up here. If you have inflammation in your large intestine, that can refer to your lower back. Yeah. So sometimes in that case, you actually have to get a colonic or something, or treat the large intestine and get you out of pain. If you keep trying to release the muscles around the back, it's not going to go away because it's not driven by that. If it's just a structural thing, if pain is just structural, you'll do a structural treatment on it, and it will go away very quickly, and it shouldn't come back. Now, if it comes back, there's different layers going on there. Yeah. And I usually always start at the top. Do you address that as well? So you start at the top with the emotional side and the mental side of it as well.
Yeah, and work your way down. And exactly right. I think one little spiel that I always have the same, what I say to most people, they go, I see a therapist all the time, I get a massage or I get dry needling or chiro or whatever it is, but it just always seems to come back again.
Yeah.
So in most cases, we're talking about structurally, like yes, if you get some relief instantly, but it comes back, we really didn't get to the root cause of why it's out in the first place.
But if it ain't sticking, you ain't thinking.
Yeah, that's it. There you go.
That's what Perry Nicholson says.
That's it. And if one little thing too, which I always say, like, okay, they've gone to get release, so fascial release, whether it be deep tissue massage or dry needling or something like that. But as we know that if you release a certain area, it then a whole line can be then opened up and let go. And that line may have been tight for a reason. It's the brain holding you there as a safety net or as a security thing to begin with. So there's more to it. And there's a lot of people might say, I went and had release, it felt good, but then all of a sudden it felt terrible afterwards, or something else then started to hurt.
Flag up, yeah.
That's it. So it started to move. So that for all you at home who do lots of fascial release, yes, it's great that you're getting onto it because the hydration of the fascial network is very important, but we do have to understand that sometimes that release of one spot might then cascade itself through the body. So if you are someone that's getting pain afterwards, definitely come and see us or someone else that knows what they're talking about, who then can assess it properly and give you more of a step-by-step approach to make sure it holds, which is the trick.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, like, if it was just pain at the tissue level, then everyone would always take 1 or 2 treatments, and then it would probably go away. If you find the right thing, if you address the right layer at the right time, the pain will go away. That being said as well, for instance, going back to before, we were talking about the developmental patterns. So if you say have missed a motor development step, that might be one of the reasons that your pain keeps coming back, because you didn't crawl properly or you didn't roll properly, and that's impacting your movement. And so when they leave, when you leave your massage therapist's office or your physio's office and you go out and have a walk, you start to walk again, but that gait pattern isn't addressed. So when you that pain can just come straight back, because it's not really, it's held within that gait pattern. It's not actually held, it's not there for no reason. It keeps coming up in that gait pattern. So you actually have to address the gait cycle, and that's sort of more the stuff you do here, isn't it? Like working on the human gait cycle.
Yep. Part of it, which should be a big part of everything. And I think I guess the final take home point anyway is that if you are someone who is suffering from pain when you work out, when you exercise, that is just a red flag. Like, you're in pain, something's not right. And I used to said this once as an analogy, that old school, why are you hitting yourself? Stop hitting yourself type thing. A lot of people will go and do a class or go and do something, oh, my knee's sore. They go back and do it again. My knee's still sore. It's like, well, stop hurting yourself. Change something up. Recognize that there's pain and see someone about it. If that trainer or the class that you're in, if they can't help you, find someone else. It's your body that you really, because it will impact you down the track. And no one wants to be at least 70 or even 60-year-old who's hobbling around the place, who can hardly move. No. Very important. It's about the sustainability of your body, and the movement and exercise should be about that. It should be about the sustainability to be able to move pain-free for the rest of your life. In my mind, that's really what the whole exercise and health and wellbeing journey is so that you can get through the rest of your life pain-free. You can move well into your 80s and even 90s, which is so much going to be better for you, your family, your friends. They don't have to, pick you up and carry you around and wheel you around the whole place. So try and think of, look at your program at the moment and your week's work of training, and kind of ask yourself, all right, well, what am I really doing? And what impact is it having on my future self down the track?
Definitely. So if you say someone who is suffering from pain and you are getting sort of regular therapy, and while it might be effective for a certain time, but it comes back, if you're not doing any movement training, so with a trainer or a movement practitioner, then that might be one of the reasons why you're not staying out of pain, because it's all well and good to release the muscles and get something moving, but you need to re-educate the nervous system about the new position. So often the best approach is when you combine the manual side, the manual release side, with the movement side. So someone that can do both, or someone that's good at the release side, someone that's good at the movement side, would be a really good combination. So that's something to think about.
Absolutely. And this topic maybe next on one of the other videos we'll probably talk about is we'll go a little bit deeper into, we'll pick a topic, whether it be a postural topic, and go through all the elements of what can create poor posture, what can hold you into poor posture, but then how to get out of it, and what that means for your health in general, and then movement. So we'll just keep sort of picking points, because just like the food topic, it's so big, and there's so much to it. Movement is also another big topic as well, because there's so much happening when we move. It's not just physically, it's very complicated, there's a lot to it. And the most complicated movement for the human body is walking. The gait cycle is extremely...
The one we take for granted.
The one we take for granted. So we'll probably touch on that another time. So there we go. So we'll see you guys on the next one soon.